Hey everybody, this is Stitch1993 here. It's the end of the month, which means it's time for me and my wife to talk about more movies that we own, where we go over I keep saying 1,300 movies. It's kind of in between 1,200 and 1,300, so sometimes I'll say 1,300, but it's somewhere in the realm of like 1,250 something. So anyways, but today it's probably going to be a bit of a shorter video than it has been in a while, because we're going to go over our Criterion collection now. That we only have, I believe, 9 movies in our Criterion collection. And for those who don't know, I'm just going to read off of the Criterion's website of what they are. So this is coming straight from the Criterion's website. It says, since 1984, the Criterion collection has been dedicated to publishing important classic and contemporary films from around the world in editions that offer the highest technical quality and award-winning original supplements, no matter the medium, from Laserdisc to DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Ultra HD to streaming. Criterion has maintained its pioneering commitment to presenting each film as its maker would want it seen, in state-of-the-art restorations with special features designed to encourage repeated watching and deepen the viewer's appreciation of the art of film. So, basically it is a collection of films, and they release a good bit of titles every month, new films, and they are usually restored to the best, highest quality, as it said. They're sometimes it's older films, as we'll get into, and sometimes it's newer ones. I think some of the more recent ones that come to memory is like Wall-E and Armageddon, and a good bit of Wes Anderson's films come to the collection. And they are a bit pricier, but they do come with a good bit of special features, as well as each of them comes with basically a small pamphlet that gives a bit of history about the director, about the film, the making of the film, etc. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about our 9 films, starting with Arsenic and Old Lace. Now, I myself am just going to give a brief thoughts on it, because in October, this is going to be one of the classic movies I go over. So, if you want to keep your eye out for that, make sure to like and subscribe, and that'll come out sometime in the middle of October. But it is a great comedy film from 1944, and it stars Cary Grant and Peter Lorre, just to name a few names, and it's a great dark comedy that takes place around Halloween. I found out about this through Turner Classic Movies back in high school, and the first time I watched it, I didn't believe what I was watching. I was like half asleep, so it wasn't until they did a repeat of it the next day or a couple days later, and I got to watch the full thing and fell in love with it. It's now probably in my top 10 favorite films of all time. And then, while I was dating my wife, I got to show it to her, and I'll let her explain how she was introduced to it.
So I had a semi-similar experience. I did believe that I had fever dreamed this movie at first, because you decided to show it to me on Christmas Day while I was on heavy antibiotics and heavy painkillers from a really bad stint with bronchitis. So I was in and out of consciousness this whole movie. The only things I remembered were the 2 little old ladies who were doing what they do. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And the guy who believes he's Teddy Roosevelt and screaming "charge" every 30 minutes in the movie. So I honestly thought I fever dreamed it. I didn't think it actually existed, because to be fair, I was running a high fever until the following Halloween, the Halloween of 2015, and I was talking about this fever dream that I had that I wasn't sure actually existed, and you went, "Oh yeah, we have that movie," and we sat down, we watched it, and now it's in my top 10 movies ever. I love everything about this movie. There's so many moments in this movie that we still quote to each other on a weekly basis, and then just bust into giggles because the movie's hilarious. It's perfect. I'd watch it every weekend if I could.
So the next film in this list is Brazil. Again, a movie that I was introduced to much later in life. I was in college when I got introduced to this film. But I actually did get introduced to one of the songs in it a lot earlier. So the song, I believe, is also called Brazil or something along those lines. And it's the music that they use for the Wall-E trailer, especially the teaser trailer. And I just, as soon as I heard that song, I fell in love with that song. And for the longest time, I just thought it was made for Wall-E. And then I saw Brazil, and I was like, oh, this is where that came from. Awesome. So, it is a Terry Gilliam film. It's featuring Jonathan Pryce. And he has basically a case of mistaken identity. And he has to go through this dystopian, workplace to try to get his life back. And just gets deeper and deeper into secrets that he comes to find out. It's got great special effects, a lot of practical effects. If you like Terry Gilliam's films, this is probably one of his best films. We'll get into a couple others later than this collection, but I believe this is probably the best of his. And I don't know if you've seen this one yet.
You have shown it to me. I didn't care for it.
Okay.
I didn't. Usually, I love Jonathan Pryce. I just didn't care for this movie.
Fair enough. It does have some interesting casting in there. So we've got Robert De Niro and Bob Hoskins showing up in here, as well as some of the cast from Monty Python, which makes sense because Terry Gilliam was part of Monty Python. He's the one that helped with creating all the 2D animations and the intro. So the next film I'm going to let you start off with because this is more up your alley.
Okay, so this one is The Breakfast Club. It is probably the best of the teen movies from the 80s. I do really like this one. I remember getting introduced to it when I was really little because my mom absolutely adored this movie. It was my first intro to Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy. I had seen Anthony Michael Hall and other things before this, and I think this is probably my favorite Judd Nelson movie. To be fair, I think I only really know of two, and we'll get to the other one way later. It is that quintessential 80s movie. If you're thinking of an 80s teen movie, you're probably going to think of scenes from The Breakfast Club. It's got that, kind of slightly awkward dance scene in the middle of the movie for kind of no reason. But to be fair, when I was a teen, my friends and I would break out and dance for literally no reason. We were just bored. It has some decently heavy moments where, the teens have decided to kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily pour their hearts out to each other, but it's just kind of almost
It's like a therapy session.
It's kind of a therapy session, but it's also kind of a let's see whose life is worse session. So it's got a lot of really quotable moments, but it also does have some moments that do not hold up. Mostly with Judd Nelson's character. Also, I really hate that they took this really cool alternative girl and turned her preppy to make her pretty. Because Ali Sheedy was already pretty. So yeah, that's pretty much Breakfast Club. Yeah. If you're looking at it through 2024 views and a 2024 lens, you're going to find a lot of problems with it. If you're looking at it as a time capsule from when it came out, then you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I gotta agree with all of that. I didn't watch this one, and again, this was another film I didn't see until college years. So I had already kind of was not watching it through the time capsule glasses, and yeah, some of those early scenes I'm like, ooh, how is this a classic now? But I mean, a good bit of it does still hold up, but there's some parts that just don't hold up as well. But the acting is fantastic. Especially, I mean, every single one of these, I wouldn't say kids, because they were all in their 20s. Heck, I think Judd was in his, 30s, or close to it when he started in that role. So
Molly might have still been really young, because I know she was really young through, all of John Hughes'
was she?
movies.
Okay, so Molly might have been, maybe the only kid, which makes that one of those scenes so much more worse. But, yeah, it does have a lot of iconic scenes that people still quote and movies still reference and parody to this day, and it is probably going to be the movie that was the one to make the kids stuck in school trope the thing to this day. So literally pretty much all of the movies that have come after that you probably can thank because of this film, more so because of John Hughes and his writing and of course the acting and talent.
It also gave us one of the best 80s songs.
It did. It did.
Especially when you find out that they were originally wanting a Bowie song, but then they found out about Don't You Forget About Me, or the band who does Don't You Forget About Me. So they went for them for the song and instead put a Bowie quote at the beginning of the movie, so you still got some Bowie in there, because it was the 80s. You had to have something Bowie.
Right. So the next one is one of the few animated movies that they've released. Now, the Criterion Collection is mostly live-action films, mainly art house films, and foreign films, but they do occasionally release an animated film, and Fantastic Planet is, I believe, their first or close to their first. It is a trippy movie. I've talked about this in my top 10 most underrated anime films. But it is a quintessential 70s film. It takes place on an alien planet where these giant blue alien creatures have basically enslaved humans, and the humans are mouse-sized, so they use them as they see them more as pests, but some people do capture them and make them as their pets. And it's so weird, and then there's uprising, and the whole time you've got these trippy visuals, these really bright colors, really weird music playing. And I mean, as I said in that top 10, even the ending is kind of wait, what? What happened? And it's hard to explain without, watching the film. And even then, after watching the film, it's one of those where it's yeah, you gotta watch that a couple more times to really not get it, just more to take it all in, basically. I know you have a trouble watching this because of your stigmatism, so we'll say if you have a stigmatism, might not enjoy this film as much, but I'll let you give more thoughts on that.
So I wouldn't say just if you have astigmatism. If you have really sensitive eyes, in general, maybe give this one a skip, because the even though the colors aren't super contrasting, they are all a pretty similar color palette, but they're so vibrant and they're so potent that it does kind of mess with my eyes, and it gave me a migraine while watching it because my eyes were having a hard time dealing with it. So this is one of the few movies that I like the sound of it. The story of it sounds really good, but I physically cannot watch it.
I will say one last thing. It is originally a French film, but it does have an English dub to it. So you can either watch it in its original French style with subtitles, or you can switch over to the English dub. I honestly prefer the English dub. It's just a bit more easier for me to watch the visuals than having to also keep looking down at the subtitles. But some people are the other way, so it's up to your preference. The next one I'm just going to talk about personally because Shelby has not seen it yet. We are planning on watching this so she may have different thoughts on it afterwards. But it's a Mad World is a comedy film, and it includes pretty much almost every single comedic actor that was big or starting to get big during the 1950s. During the 1950s and 60s. It came out in 63, but most of these actors are in here have been around for about a decade or so before, and some of them would continue on for many decades afterwards. So you've got people like Spencer Tracy, Milton Berle, Mickey Rooney, Buddy Hackett, Ethel Merman, Sid Caesar, and just as, and you then on top of that, you've got people that are just in there for like one brief second. You're just like, wait a second, you're in here. So yeah, so it's all, they're all trying to find a treasure. Now, if this sounds familiar, they did make another type of film like this in the 2000s called Rat Race, which is almost basically the same setup scenario, and the same type of just every single big name comedic actor at that time starring in it. But if you want to see the one that started it all, definitely check out It's a Mad World. I believe that Criterion version is the best version of the film. It has been released on other formats, but I believe some of the formats have cut parts out of it. It is over 3 hours long for the Criterion series, for the Criterion version. So I think that is the preferred version to watch if you want to get the full thing in. There's some versions that are DVD that are shorter, so take that as you will. And the next one I'm also going to talk about, because again, Shelby hasn't seen it. She hasn't seen it. The Criterion series is mainly a me thing, because it's got a lot of the films that I would personally enjoy that she's not fond of, mainly fantasy films. Mainly fantasy films from the 70s and 80s. And speaking of which, Jabberwocky, coming out in 1977, another Terry Gilliam film. It is based on the story from Alice in Wonderland from Lewis Carroll about the dragon and about the night person going and killing him. It does star, of course, some of the cast from Monty Python's Flying Circus and other films, but it takes itself just a smidge more seriously. So don't go into this thinking that it's going to be the next like Life of Brian or Holy Grail. It's a bit more darker. It does have some jokes and stuff in it, but it does try to take itself a bit more seriously, which kind of makes it interesting there. It does have, of course, practical effects being in the 70s, and the Jabberwocky, when you do see it, I don't know. I didn't mind it, but compared to the poster and, of course, the DVD, it's a bit underwhelming in my opinion. I know this was kind of done on a smaller budget, so I'm sure they would have liked to have made the Jabberwocky look more like the poster, but it just kind of ends up looking like a really bad Godzilla costume ripoff creature. But that's just my personal opinion. I still enjoy watching the movie. Is just the final act is just kind of a bit. I could watch the movie up until then, turn off, and not feel bad doing that. The next movie is probably the most interesting in this collection, in my personal opinion. It's 1991's Naked Lunch. It's a bit hard of how to explain this film, but so I'm not going to try to explain it. I will say you'll just have to go and watch it for yourselves. I don't fully enjoy this one personally, story-wise, because it does get a bit too weird, in my opinion. But I love the creature effects in this. I love the puppet effects. It's got some probably the coolest creature effects for the 90s. That's not a horror film. It is definitely sexually driven there. Yeah, it is a bit grotesque. So if that doesn't sound like it's up your alley, skip it. It's not one that you have to see. It's just an interesting film to see. It's not one I wouldn't say it's one you only watch once and then you don't ever want to watch again. If I ever found myself in the mood to check it out, like I wanted to see the creature effects, I wouldn't mind putting this on, but it's more of a film that I wouldn't sit down with like friends and family and watch. This is one that would, if I just have some time to kill, I would put it on and watch myself.
Yeah, you definitely learned it's not a film that you necessarily want to watch with others, because you tried to watch it with me and I noped out within the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It got too weird. It got too gross. If you were squeamish, do not watch this movie.
Yeah. But the next film is a bit on the lighter one, and is one Shelby has seen. It is Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. So, interesting thing, Time Bandits, Brazil, and a third one that I don't have yet, which is Baron Munchausen, is all considered a trilogy of sorts, kind of like the Cornetto trilogy. It is, I believe it's called the Life of a Man trilogy, or something along those lines. So, Time Bandits is considered the first film because it follows a kid in a fantasy area. And then Brazil is the second one because it follows an adult man in the fantasy area. And then the third film is Baron Munchausen because it follows an old man in a fantasy area. Of course, again, Baron Munchausen, I believe, just came out on Criterion like a year or two. Or like they re-released it on Blu-ray like a year or two ago. So I don't have that one in my collection yet. It is on my list to eventually get. And I do enjoy that film. But going back to Time Bandits, yes, so it is a kid who gets basically kidnapped by these Time Bandits, by these group of their short people that have stolen a time machine, or more like a time watch, and are just skipping around from century to century and stealing all the gold and treasure that they can. And every century that they go into is like fantastical. You go to the Napoleon War, you go to Greek gods, you even go back to I believe somewhere in the future for a little bit. And every time, great fantastic sets, and the cast for this film is really cool. So of course you got Sean Connery, Shelley Duvall, John Cleese, Ian Holm, and many more. And it's just one interesting thing after another. Eventually, I believe it's God that is coming after, is considered like the villain for some of it, because he's trying to get them to return the time watch. And it's just a very cute film. It does have a weird ending, I will give you that. It kind of ends somewhat abruptly in a somewhat dark ending, at least for me, especially when I saw it as a kid. I didn't understand why it ended like that. And then my dad just kind of explained that's just kind of how the British humor is. I don't know. Every one of these films for Terry Gilliam kind of ends a bit on a darker tone, but it's supposed to be played for comedic effect. So keep that in mind when watching the film. As I said, Shelby has seen this one. I don't know how much she remembers, so I'll just let her give her thoughts on it.
So it's not a movie that stuck with me. I don't really remember anything of it. I know I've seen it. I may have fallen asleep in it. I'm not sure. I do think, though, it might be I just don't really like Terry Gilliam thing.
Fair enough. And that's fine. He is a director. His films are kind of hit or miss with just people in general. You're either going to enjoy them or you're not. Or you might just enjoy one or two of them and not like the rest of them. Because he does have a really interesting sense of humor. Even more interesting than just Monty Python in general. It does get a bit more darker and a bit more twisted than compared to just like the regular Monty Python films. And so, yeah, going...
And see, that's the thing. I do enjoy a good bit of Monty Python. I just don't think I enjoy his stuff alone. And it might be the sense of humor. It might also be he does get more into the fantasy side of things. And I'm picky on what type of fantasy I like. I'm going to be honest, I really... just into like the girly fantasy.
And just wait until we get to that fantasy collection. She's going to have some thoughts on some films that are going to piss people off.
Yeah.
I will say, I haven't watched it yet. I do know that this did just recently get released as a television show, or it's about to, as a television series for Apple Plus. I haven't checked it out yet. I haven't even watched a trailer. I've only seen some screenshots. It looks interesting. I don't know if it's going to be like a direct remake of the film, or if like every episode's going to be a part of the film, like every episode is going to be them traveling to another place in time. That would be cool. I don't really mind. I have to watch it before I give any thoughts on it. I don't even know if Terry Gilliam is helping out with the film at all, or if this is just something that the producers are making because they have the rights to the film.
And see, the thing is, I might actually enjoy it more as a show than a movie, because a lot of the issue I have with a lot of fantasy movies is it feels like you don't get enough time to develop the ideas they're going for, because they're trying to stuff so much into 90 minutes. So I just feel like I got rushed through too much of it, and I don't get connected to any of it. So I do find myself enjoying fantasy shows more than fantasy movies.
Fair enough. And last but not least is Watership Down. So this was a film I did get introduced to young. I believe I was still in elementary school, maybe middle school, when I got shown this. And, when, people say, oh, this scarred me as a child, it actually didn't. For me, I watched it, I'm like, oh, yeah, torture, blood, death, that's horrible. But for me, I'm like, but it's a cartoon, so it's not that bad. And it was a cartoon from the 70s, so it's like the animation wasn't so graphic yet. It does get, it is dark, and it's based on a book that's equally dark. I know it got remade as a miniseries on Netflix a few years back or so. I haven't checked it out yet, so I don't know how that compares to this film. But it is a very interesting film. It's about a group of wild rabbits trying to find a new home because, humanity is taking over and destroying their land. So they try to find a new place to live, and throughout the adventure, they come across other rabbits that are more territorial and there's metaphors for like religion and stuff. There's ones that have been tortured, they get caught by other wild animals, and there's death and destruction and blood. There is blood in this film, and other than John Hurt, I don't really know much more, or other than John Hurt, I really don't know many of the other people that voice in this cast. I very much enjoyed the film. I did show this to Shelby, and she has her thoughts.
I hate this movie. This is probably the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It did scar me. I will never watch this again. I would rather watch every iteration of it than watch this movie ever again, and it terrifies me. This movie scarred me. I was a full-grown adult. I am the type of person that will look up if the pet dies in a movie to decide if I'm going to watch this movie. And there's just a lot of bunny death in this movie. I hated every second of this. This was horrible. No.
So, yeah, as I said, if you do not like animal deaths, whether live action or animated, probably best to skip this film. And that is it for the Criterion Collection. As I said, this is going to be a shorter film. And so the next genre we are going to be talking for a while. We are going to, I will say, before we say what it is, when we get to the holiday seasons, we will make a stop and talk about our horror films for October and our holiday films for December. But from now until probably a good bit into next year, the next genre is going to be Disney films. Yes, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of Disney films. And I know a lot of people have been asking, what are your thoughts about X film and Y film and Z film? And we will give you our thoughts on them. And yes, that includes Toy Story, Lilo and Stitch, Rocketeer, we have over 100 Disney films, so it's going to be a while before we get to a lot of them, and they'll be in alphabetical order, starting with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and ending with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I believe is the last one in that, or Wreck-It Ralph, one of those two.
It might end with that, because you got to remember the holiday season is going to be coming up while we're going through this, and both sides of our family love to give us Disney movies for holidays, mostly because they're on my Amazon wish list, because I am the Disney adult of the house. We will get to every single one we own, and we do own a lot of them. Also, we're probably going to make some people mad with some opinions there, because we definitely have some conflicting opinions on quite a few of those movies.
We do. Some Disney films I thoroughly enjoy. She does not. And some films she thoroughly enjoy. She does not. Doesn't mean we straight up hate these films. I don't think I've watched a Disney movie I absolutely hate. Some I just dislike. And I think same...
Yeah,
with you?
I think there's some that weird me out. There are a couple that weird me out, but doesn't mean I hate them.
Mm-hmm. So just to give a bit more, that will include, we only have a couple Star Wars films. We don't have all of them. I know, weird, but that's just what has happened in our life. So we will talk on a couple of the Star Wars films. We will go over the Muppet films. We will not be talking about the Marvel films, because that is going to be its own video much later down the line. Because there's a lot of Marvel films, so that the Marvel series is like in its own category on our DVD shelves. It is not mixed in with the Disney films at all. And we probably would do the same thing with the Star Wars films if we owned more of them. But with that, be sure to like and subscribe for next month, for when we start talking for the first 20 or so films in the Disney collection. And until next time, thank you and have a good day.
See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.